Communications 101, Persuasive Speech Number 4. Thousands of American citizens have been murdered each year by a criminal who has been released or paroled. The death penalty for murderers should be used through all the proper hearings if found guilty. Punishment for heinous crimes should be taken seriously. That is why the death penalty should not be abolished. Every day, people are taking a chance at life with criminals that could be living in their neighborhood. Someone who may have murdered someone years before could be living across the street from friends or family because they have paroled out of prison or because they have served the time for their life in prison sentence. The punishment needs to fit for serious crimes. The death penalty, legally known as capital punishment, is the lawful imposition of death as punishment for crimes. In the state of Indiana, the death penalty is available only for crime of murder and is available for murder only if the prosecution can prove that the existence of one of 16 aggravating circumstances identified by the Indiana General Assembly. These circumstances are set out in the state's death penalty statute at IC 3552-9. Some of the aggravating circumstances mentioned in the statute that warrant the death penalty are arson, burglary, child molesting, criminal deviant conduct, kidnapping, rape, robbery, carjacking, and criminal gang activity. These crimes are brutal and inhumane in nature, and the perpetrator needs to be taken seriously in the court of law. The punishment needs to fit the crime, which is why the death penalty should not be abolished. With the death penalty fitting the crime, it may be a good deterrent for crime for many individuals. As most people know, society uses punishment to discourage unwanted activities. If the people have a high interest in preventing murder, then we, as a society, should use the strongest punishment available to deter murder, the death penalty. Ernest van den Haag, a professor of jurisprudence at Fordham University who has studied the question of deterrence closely, wrote, "Even though statistical demonstrations are not conclusive and perhaps cannot be, capital punishment is likely to deter more than other punishments because people fear death more than anything else. They fear most death deliberately inflicted by the law and scheduled by the courts. Whatever people fear most is likely to deter most. Hence, the threat of the death penalty may deter some murderers who otherwise might have not been deterred. Each execution deters an average of 18 murders, according to a 2003 nationwide study by professors at Emory University. In the case of Rosa Velez's murder, Luis Vera burglarized her apartment and shot her, and asked why, he stated, "Yeah, I shot her and I knew I would not go to the chair." Various people believe that if the death penalty was implemented in this case, then he might have thought twice about killing her. In the second case, in 1973, Arthur Shawcross, one of New York's most ruthless serial killers, raped and murdered 2 children. After serving only 15 years in prison, he was paroled in 1988. Raped and in a horrific killing spree, Shawcross took the lives of 11 more people. That is, 11 innocent people who would be alive today had justice been served 24 years before. 11 families that would have been spared the pain and agony of losing a loved one. In this case, if the death penalty would have been in place, Shawcross would have never been put back out on the streets to do the same. That is why having the death penalty as part of a murder case, closure would have been given to the victim's family and 11 others would have never been murdered by him. Putting the perpetrator to rest gives closure to the victim's family. Closure means a resolution of a significant event or relationship in one's life. Having the murderer put off the streets brings the whole community peace and closure. Also to note, it may not happen to their family by that person. One article mentions one of the things that help hasten this recovery is to achieve some kind of closure. Life in prison just means the criminal is still around to haunt the victim. A death sentence brings finality to a horrible chapter in the lives of these family members. To receive the death penalty, a very cruel and heinous crime may take place. The offenders of these kind of crimes deserve the worst punishment they can receive. It is believed that any lesser punishment would undermine the value society has placed on protecting the lives of innocent people. Retribution has its basis in religious values, which have historically maintained that it is proper to take an eye for an eye or a life for a life. It is understood that the victim and the victim's family cannot be restored to the status which preceded the murder. But executing the murderer can bring closure to the crime and ensures the population that the murderer will not be able to create a victim out of their family or friends. Robert Macy, District Attorney of Oklahoma City, described his concept of the need for retribution in one case. In 1991, a young mother was rendered helpless and made to watch her as her baby was executed. The mother then was mutilated and killed. The killer should not lie in some prison with 3 meals a day, clean sheets, cable TV, family visits, and endless appeals. For justice to prevail, some killers just need to die. In the case of Jody Sanderholm, a 19-year-old Cali College student, the sentenced death of her killer, Justin Thurber, brings closure to the Sanderholm family. Their daughter disappeared January 5, 2007 after a dance practice at Cali College. Her body was found days later in a remote Call Wildlife area, bruised and battered. In a press conference after the sentencing, Brian Soderholm said his only consolation is knowing that Thurber will not be able to take the lives of any young girls in the community. Cindy Sanderholm was asked how it felt to know that Thurber might be out of Cali County by the end of the day. Her response, "I hated living 15 minutes from him. He's just gone now. That's what matters." In this case, it is shown how having their daughter's killer sentenced to death brings closure to the family, knowing he is not going to be anywhere near the community and is not going to be able to harm anyone else. Abolitionists claim that there are alternatives to the death penalty. They say that life in prison serves just as well. As seen before, some of those murderers get out and do the same thing. What about all the people who are paroled out of life in prison because of law changes and because of time? They go right back out and do the same thing. For example, Kenneth McDuff was convicted of the 1966 shooting of 2 boys and vicious rape strangulation of their 16-year-old companion. He was originally supposed to die in the electric chair, but a sentencing of life in prison in 1972 was granted after U.S. Supreme Court struck down the death penalty as then imposed. In 1989, the Texas prisons overflowing and the state officials under fire from the federal judiciary, McDuff was let out on the streets. Within days, a naked body turned up of a 31-year-old prostitute that had been beaten, strangled, and dumped in a field near Temple. McDuff was then jailed for a minor racial incident and was out again in 1990. In 1991, he enrolled in a Texas State Technical College, and then soon after, Central Texas prostitutes began disappearing. The first one's naked body was found in a shallow grave in the woods behind the college. The second was last seen kicking and screaming in the cab of McDuff's pickup truck. The third woman disappeared from an Austin car wash. Witnesses reported hearing a woman screaming that night and seeing 2 men speeding away in a yellow or tan Thunderbird. Then, a little more than 2 months later, a pregnant woman vanished from the Waco convenience store where she worked. McDuff's beige Thunderbird was discovered a block away from the store. McDuff was later charged with 3 murders and eventually put to death by lethal injection. If McDuff would have been put to death the first time, he would have never been able to go out and kill more people. Putting a murderer away for life is not good enough. Laws change, so do parole boards, and people forget the past. No matter how small of a chance, there is always a way that murderers will get out and strike again. So in the end, the death penalty should be sustained. Eye for an eye should not be taken lightly. Life is precious and should not be taken for granted. But we also have to believe that there are bad people out there. Just as small as a child taking a piece of candy, crimes need to be punished. Fitting a punishment for a crime is a necessary process of deterrence. So taking a life has to be punished just as all crimes. The only way to stop the murders of innocent people is to punish the murderers the right way the first time. Doing this helps keep other murderers from continuing this long fight with crime and see how the guilty are punished. All in all, the death penalty is a deterrent and helps in closure with the victim's family. In a comment made by Janice Hunter after Nathaniel White killed her daughter, "It's a heartache that all parents suffer. I have to go to the cemetery to see my daughter. Nathaniel White's mother goes to jail to see him, and I don't think it's fair. Should the victim's family have to suffer day after day when the killers gets to do whatever they want within the walls of prison and still gets to see family members? All families need to have closure and feel that justice is served. The death penalty should not be abolished.